Sorry. I'm just scratching my nose there. Right. Hello, Mrs. AlfreDori. And, of course, Mr. AlfreDori, too, if he happens to have the time to wander over to this corner of the internet. I'm sure that I must owe you at least 3 or 4 of these. So I'll do you another one today. Thank you for bidding and generating interest in my auctions. I really do appreciate that. And, of course, I had planned, and I still do plan, to read you a few interesting bits from Cheerful Chuckling Churan, except I'm looking about at the bedlam surrounding me, and I don't honestly think that I can find it. I've found something I've been looking for. Well, that's good at least. Envelope. Where's that going? I don't know. And I'm guessing you don't want a little natural history book all about the gannet. I love gannets. You might like gannets too, but you really don't want all this detail. What about the colonies? Where they are in Scotland and how many breeding pairs they support? No. I can't find anything at the moment. Ugh. So, what have we got lying around that might possibly be of interest to you in Joran's place? Well, I do have a letter from Dignitas in Switzerland thanking me for joining them. It's kind of like a bit of last-minute health insurance when things get that bad, as they almost certainly will. There you are. I hope that cheered you up as much as Joran did. Anyway, right. So we can. Oh, bollocks. So alternatives are something Oana might recognise. I think it was this one that got sent to Italy, wasn't it? I don't know. I can't remember. But it's very much along your lines of interest too. And is this... Oops, sorry. This is going to be... Well, it's interesting philosophy, so I think it will be that one. It's also very relevant to HP. And I think we will have a chapter from that, or a little start of a chapter. I've only just got this, and I'm not really familiar with it. So, see if we recognise anything. John Locke, yes. Anthony Quinton, whom I met once. Very thoughtful man, and gosh, nobody else. Oh, David Hume, yeah, I've heard of him. But as for Shoemaker and Usgalis and John Perry, I don't know any of them at all. What's the most immediately appealing? Let's have some David Hume. I hope that's acceptable. So we had Cartesian rationalism yesterday, or the day before. Now we can have some balancing Edinburgh empiricism. Is that right? I say these things, but I'm not quite sure I'm always right. And it's not too long a passage, so I won't bamboozle myself. I'm sure I wouldn't bamboozle either of you two at any point. Okay. David Hume, Our Idea of Identity, which is chapter 10 of Personal Identity, edited by John Perry, Perry. You can see that. Oh, bollocks. Yeah, I did show you that, didn't I? Bit vacant. Alright, I'll read rather than ramble. First, as to the principle of individuation, we may observe that the view of any one object is not sufficient to convey the idea of identity. For in that proposition, an object is the same with itself, the idea expressed by the word object were no ways distinguished from that meant by itself. We really should mean nothing, nor would the proposition contain a predicate and a subject, which, however, are implied in this affirmation. One single object conveys the idea of unity, not that of identity. On the other hand, a multiplicity of objects can never convey this idea, however resembling they may be supposed to be. The mind always pronounces the one not to be the other, and considers them as forming 2, 3, or any determinate number of objects whose existences are entirely distinct and independent. Since then, both number and unity are incompatible with the relation of identity, it must lie in something that is neither of them. But, to tell the truth, at first sight, this seems utterly impossible. Betwixt unity and number, there can be no medium, no more than betwixt existence and non-existence. After one object is supposed to exist, we must either suppose another also to exist, in which case we have the idea of number, or we must suppose a second object not to exist, in which case the first object retains its unity. To remove this difficulty, let us have recourse to the idea of time or duration. I have already observed, apparently in section 5, part 2 of book 1 of the Treatise of Human Nature, which I'm happy to say that I haven't read, that time, in a strict sense, implies succession, and that when we apply its idea to any unchangeable object, it is only by a fiction of the imagination by which the unchangeable object is supposed to participate of the changes of the coexistent objects, and in particular that of our perceptions. I'm sorry for making a mess of that sentence. This hasn't been updated. The text hasn't been updated from the, whatever it was, early 18th century English in which it was originally published. It's difficult. What makes a difficult subject even more difficult. Yeah, you are hearing the English correctly. It just may not be sinking in. I do not blame you if it is not. The fiction of the imagination almost universally takes place, and it is by means of it that a single object placed before us, and surveyed for any time, without our discovering in it any interruption or variation, is able to give us a notion of identity. For when we consider any 2 points of this time, we may place them in different lights. We may either survey them at the very same instant, in which case they give us the idea of number, both by themselves and by the object, which must be multiplied in order to be conceived at once as existent in these 2 different times. Or, on the other hand, we may trace the succession of time by a like succession of ideas, and conceiving first one moment along which the object then existent, imagine afterwards a change in the time without any variation or interruption in the object, in which case it gives us the idea of unity. Here, then, is an idea, which is a medium between unity and number, or, more properly speaking, is either of them, according to the view in which we take it. And this idea we call that of identity. We cannot, in any propriety of speech, say that an object is the same with itself, unless we mean that the object existent at one time is the same with itself existent at another. By this means we make a difference between the idea meant by the word object and that meant by itself, without going to the length of number, and at the same time without restraining ourselves to a strict and absolute unity. Thus, thank goodness, thus the principle of individuation is nothing but the invariableness and uninterruptedness of any object through a supposed variation of time, by which the mind can trace in it the different periods of its existence, without any break of the view, and without being obliged to form the idea of multiplicity or number. I don't know how much you got out of that. I'm ashamed to say I didn't really get much out of that at all. And I really think I am heading towards a rationalist worldview. I can't just throw empiricism away because of a lack of clarity. Well, I don't know if there was a lack of clarity. Am I being thick, lazy, and harsh? I don't know. Maybe I should have read some more of that before passing judgment. But I've been lazy this morning and very dopey. And I'm cross that I cannot find my children books. I don't suppose it's fair to blame David Hume for the disappearance of my books, is it? No? Well, I'll have a sip of coffee and consider who to blame. I could blame Oana. No, seriously, Oana, if you happen to see this, please come back. Really. It would be nice and interesting and everything. And if you don't, I will stop reading 17th and 18th century philosophy to your sister, and I will read this to her, because I'm sure she will love it, and I will ask her questions about this. An anthology of fashion writing, which I'm sure is the sort of thing that she spends all her time looking at. Of course she does. I wonder if there is anything in the index about Brasov. Nope. Behave, John. Right. I'm going to be good, and I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you if you bothered listening to this. I'm sorry I was a bit dopey. Yeah, well, I am sometimes. Bye.